Some families don't fall apart in a single night. I wrote in my diary the morning after it happened. They unravel one quiet decision at a time. I was 71 years old when my neighborhood learned my last name in the worst possible way, and it wasn't because I'd won something or made the evening news for a good reason. It was a Tuesday, ordinary sky, ordinary errands, the kind of day you think you'll forget, until I stepped out onto my front porch and felt the air change. Not wind, not weather, attention, the kind that sticks to your skin. I saw two cars stopped where they shouldn't have been, one of them with a door open as if the driver had gotten out in a hurry. Across the street, Mrs. Donnelly's curtains were doing that little twitch they do when someone is pretending not to watch. A phone screen glinted in sunlight, angled toward my driveway, toward my house, toward me. I remember thinking, this can't be about us. We're the Carters. We're the nice family. We return shopping carts. We send thank you notes. We wave at neighbors. My husband, Michael Carter, had always believed that if you kept your lawn trimmed and your voice calm, the world would leave you alone. That belief is a comfortable lie, and I helped him hold it like a shield. The sound I'll never forget wasn't a siren or a shout. It was my own name, spoken softly by someone I barely knew, like a verdict, like a rumor confirmed. Evelyn, a woman said from the sidewalk, not stepping onto my property, but not looking away either. I turned, and every head turned with me. I could feel it. People had already decided what kind of person I was, what kind of wife I must have been, what kind of mother I had to be for this to happen. I wanted to say, you don't understand. You don't know him. You don't know me. But the truth was worse. I did understand, and I did know, and I still made the choice that brought us here. Behind me, the front door creaked, and Michael appeared as if he'd been summoned by my fear. His face had that tight, polite look he used when he was trying to control a room. It was the same expression he wore at church potlucks and parent-teacher nights, the same. One he'd practiced in the mirror for decades. For a second, his eyes met mine, and I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to see for years, panic. Not the quick kind that passes, but the deep kind that has been living in a person's chest, feeding quietly, waiting for daylight. My hands started to shake, so I clasped them together and told myself to breathe. I thought about my daughter, Sarah, who hadn't returned my last 3 calls. I thought about my son, Jason, who'd moved 2 states away and suddenly got busy whenever I asked about visiting. I thought about the family photos on our hallway wall, the ones where everyone's smiling like happiness is a permanent address. And I thought about the one choice I made long ago, one small, cowardly decision that felt like protection at the time. Don't say anything, I told myself. Keep it in the house. Keep it clean. Keep it quiet. That was my choice. Silence. And standing there with strangers watching, with neighbors guessing, with my husband trying to hold his composure like a cracked glass, I understood something I had refused to accept. Silence doesn't keep a family safe. Silence just gives the slow damage more time to spread. After that Tuesday, people would say things like, I always thought the Carters had it together, as if a family is a living room you can judge from the sidewalk. The truth is, we did look put together. Michael kept the grass cut every Saturday morning, even when the summer heat made the air feel thick enough to hold. I baked casseroles for church fundraisers, signed birthday cards early, and made sure our porch light worked because my mother taught me that small signals mattered. Our house smelled like lemon cleaner on Sundays and coffee on weekday mornings. We were not flashy. We were not dramatic. We were, to everyone watching, safe. Michael and I built that picture slowly, year by year, the way you build a fence, one board at a time, making sure the neighbors saw the straight lines. We met when I was 22 and he was 24, both of us still believing that hard work was a guarantee. He sold appliances at a local store, wearing a tie that never sat quite right. I worked the front desk at a dentist's office, answering phones with the kind of practice cheer you learn when you are young and trying to be liked. Michael used to bring me a paper cup of ice water on my lunch break, like it was a gift. He had that steady way about him, the kind that made me feel like life would be simple if I stayed close to him. When we married, we rented a small place with thin walls and a noisy air conditioner, and we told ourselves it did not matter because we were building something. And we did. We saved. We bought a modest home in a neighborhood where kids rode bikes in circles, and everyone acted like they were too busy to gossip, even though they never were. We had 2 children, Sarah and Jason, and I poured myself into being dependable. Packed lunches, permission slips, clean uniforms, dinner at the same time most nights. Michael worked his way up, not into some glamorous position, but into one with a little more responsibility and a little more pride. He liked being the man people relied on. He liked walking into a room and having someone nod as if he belonged there. That was always Michael's secret hunger: belonging, approval, the quiet respect that makes a person feel safe. The older we got, the more that hunger turned into pressure. Costs rose. Plans expanded. The children needed braces, then cars, then college conversations. Michael started talking about providing like it was a scoreboard. He took pride in never saying no, not to the kids, not to me, not to anyone who asked. At first, I thought it was love. Then I realized it was fear, the fear of being seen as less. Michael's mood began to change in ways I could not name out loud. He would come home later than usual, still in his work clothes, smelling like the air inside an office building, and he would move through the kitchen like he was trying not to touch anything. When the phone rang, he would glance at it too quickly, then pretend he had not. He started sorting the mail before I could see it, setting certain envelopes aside with a casualness that did not match the tightness in his jaw. Once, I found a notice folded into quarters in the trash, tucked under coffee grounds. As if that could hide it, I unfolded it with hands that felt suddenly clumsy, and my eyes latched onto the numbers. They were not enormous, not the kind that belongs to lottery winners or movie villains. They were ordinary, which made them more frightening, because ordinary numbers can be explained away until they multiply. When I asked Michael about it, he did not yell. He did not storm off. He smiled, too calmly, and said it was a mistake that would be handled. Then he kissed my forehead as if I had asked about the weather. I remember standing at the sink afterward, staring at water running over my fingers, thinking that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was what marriage required: trust, patience, not making a scene. I wanted so badly to keep the picture intact that I convinced myself the shadows were just a trick of the light. The next few weeks taught me how quickly a small mistake can become a pattern, and how a pattern can become a life you do not recognize. I started noticing details the way you notice a strange sound in your car after someone points it out. A second envelope with bold print. A call that ended the moment I walked into the room. Michael rinsing his coffee mug twice as if he had to keep his hands busy. He would sit at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, then slide them into a folder the moment I came near, smiling as if he was planning a surprise vacation. I wanted to believe that smile. I wanted to believe the man I married would never build secrets inside our home. So I tried to do what I had always done: maintain order. I made lists, cleaned harder, cooked favorite meals, asked gentle questions in a gentle voice. But the questions kept getting stuck in my throat, because every time I looked at Michael I saw strain, and I did not want to add to it. Then one afternoon, I found the first real crack by accident. I was looking for a coupon booklet in the drawer where I kept stamps and spare batteries. Underneath a rubber band and a small stack of old takeout menus, my fingers touched something slick and unfamiliar. It was a new credit card statement, folded and tucked behind everything else. I unfolded it. Slowly, as if the numbers might change if I moved too fast. They did not. There were charges that made no sense to me, not because they were outrageous, but because they were frequent, steady, and carefully spaced like footsteps. There were also late fees. That word, late, felt personal. We were not the kind of people who were late on bills. My stomach tightened in a way I had only felt when my children were sick as toddlers and I did not know what to do. I sat down at the table and read every line twice, then a third time, hoping I had misunderstood. I had not. When Michael came home, I did not greet him at the door like usual. I waited until he set his keys down, until he was close enough to see my face. I placed the statement in front of him without a word. His eyes flicked down, then up, then away. For a second, he looked older than he was, as if he had been carrying something heavy for too long. "Where did you get that?" he asked, not angry, just tight. "It was in the drawer," I said. My voice sounded calm, and that scared me, because calm was how I handled emergencies in public. Calm was not how you talk to your husband about hidden debt. Michael exhaled slowly and sat down. He did not touch the paper. He stared past it, as if looking straight at the wall would keep his life from falling apart. "It is not what you think," he said. "Then tell me what it is," I replied. There was a long pause, the kind that fills a room and changes the air. Finally, he said he had tried to handle a few things, that he had made a bad choice, and then another bad choice to cover it, and that he had been planning to fix it before I found out. I asked how long it had been going on. He hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. My mind jumped to Sarah and Jason, to their college plans and their trust in us, to the way they still called their father when they needed advice. I pictured telling them, and I felt shame rise like heat in my chest, even though I had done nothing wrong. Michael reached across the table, not fully, just enough, that his hand hovered near mine without touching. "Evelyn," he said, softer now, "please. Do not say anything. Not to the kids. Not to anyone. Let me fix it. If they find out, it will destroy how they see me. It will destroy us." I looked at him and realized he was not only asking for time. He was asking for silence, for permission, for protection from consequences. He was asking me to help him keep the picture intact. And in that moment, I felt the old instinct in me stand up straight, the instinct to keep the peace, to keep the family safe, to keep the neighbors from talking. I wanted to be the wife who held things together. I wanted to believe that love meant shielding the people you love from the worst of themselves. I did not know then that silence does not shield a family. Silence only delays the collapse, and it makes everyone inside the house pay interest. I said yes to Michael that night, and I told myself it was temporary, the way people tell themselves a storm will pass if they keep the windows shut. I did not announce my decision. I did not write it on a calendar. I simply stepped into it, quietly, like stepping onto a frozen pond and hoping it would hold. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker, as if it could give me instructions. Michael came in rubbing his eyes, and for a moment he looked like the man I knew again, the man who used to bring me ice water in a paper cup. "Thank you," he said, meaning my silence, not my coffee. That word landed wrong. It made me feel less like a wife and more like a witness he had managed to convince. He promised he would fix everything. He promised it was already getting better. He promised he would never put us in this position again. I wanted to believe him so badly that I nodded, and my nod became the first brick in a wall I would build between myself and my children. At first, the silence did not feel like lying. It felt like privacy. It felt like protecting Sarah and Jason from stress they did not need. I told myself parents handled problems so their kids could focus on their lives. But then the handling began, and that is when silence turns into a job. Michael started paying some things late and other things early, juggling dates and minimum payments like a man trying to keep plates spinning. The mailbox became a threat. I began checking it before he got home, sorting envelopes quickly, deciding what he could see and what I needed to hide. I hated the way my heart raced when I heard the mail truck stop, hated that I could recognize the sound of certain types of envelopes just by the weight when I picked them up. When a letter came with bold print on the outside, I would fold it and tuck it into my purse like contraband. I started making small financial adjustments without discussing them, because discussing them would mean admitting something was wrong. I cut coupons like my life depended on it. I told Michael we should skip eating out just because. I switched brands at the grocery store and said it was healthier or cheaper or both. I canceled a streaming subscription and pretended I did not miss it. I delayed replacing my worn-out shoes, even when the soles started to feel thin. None of these choices were dramatic. That is the danger. Slow damage rarely announces itself with fireworks. It arrives like dust, collecting on the same surfaces every day until everything looks dull. Michael's promises kept coming, but so did the tension. Some nights, he would sit at the table with his laptop open, staring at numbers as if he could intimidate them into behaving. Other nights, he would try to act normal, talking too loudly about sports or the weather, smiling at jokes that were not funny. I learned to match his performance, because if I did not, the silence would break. And the idea of breaking it felt like pushing a heavy object off a cliff. Sarah called less often, but when she did, I heard it in her voice, the careful politeness of a grown child who is sensing something off. "You sound tired, Mom," she said once. "Are you and Dad okay?" I told her we were fine. I said it the way I said have a safe drive, automatic and practiced. After I hung up, my hands shook so badly I had to grip the counter until it passed. Jason started asking questions about money in a casual way that was not casual at all. "Are you guys good for retirement?" he asked during one visit, looking around the living room like he was taking inventory. I laughed and told him we were doing great, that his father had everything under control. Michael stood behind me and nodded, grateful and guilty at the same time. That look, gratitude mixed with guilt, became a familiar shadow in our home. The worst part was that the more I lied, the easier it became to lie again. I began rehearsing answers in my head before the kids even asked. I began measuring every conversation for risk, like walking through a room full of fragile glass. And somewhere in the middle of all that carefulness, I realized I was no longer protecting my family. I was protecting the story of my family, the version that looked good from the sidewalk. And stories, no matter how pretty, cannot pay what the truth will eventually demand. The first time I pulled Sarah into it, I did not call it pulling. I called it just asking for help, the way people soften a request when they know it is wrong. She was in her early 30s then, building her own life, careful with money in a way that made me proud and, secretly, resentful, because it reminded me of how careless Michael and I had been with the truth. Sarah came over on a Saturday with a tote bag full of meal prep containers and that efficient energy she always carried, the kind that made the kitchen feel brighter. I watched her wipe down my counters without being asked, and I thought, she should not be doing this. She should be living her own day. But Michael was in the living room, pretending to watch a game while his leg bounced like a metronome, and I knew another envelope had come. I knew the dates. I knew the math. I also knew that if I said the words out loud, the picture would crack. So I did what I had practiced. I smiled and kept my voice gentle. Honey, I said, could you do me a favor? It is nothing serious. That was my first lie in that conversation. I told her we had a temporary cash flow issue because of a bank mix-up, and I asked if she could float us a small amount for a couple of weeks. I said 2 weeks, as if time obeys wishes. Sarah's eyes narrowed just a little, not in anger, but in focus. How much is small? She asked. When I told her, her mouth tightened. She did not lecture me. She did not raise her voice. She looked past me toward the living room, where Michael sat too still, and she understood more than I wanted her to. Is Dad okay? She asked quietly. I laughed, too quickly. Your father is fine, I said, and the speed of my answer made it obvious I was not fine. Sarah hesitated, then nodded once, the way a responsible person nods when they decide to handle something unpleasant. She transferred the money that evening. When she hugged me goodbye, her arms were stiff, and I felt the distance forming like a thin sheet of ice between us. After she left, Michael thanked me with that same grateful, guilty look, and I hated him for it. Then hated myself for hating him, because hating him would mean admitting the truth. My silence was no longer private. It was contagious. Jason was next, though he did not know it at first. He called one night to talk about a job opportunity out of state, excited and nervous, and I should have been fully with him. Instead, I was listening to the kitchen clock, counting minutes, thinking about a payment due the next morning. Michael walked through behind me, mouthing words I could not say. So I did the thing I am most ashamed of. I steered my son's future with the hidden hand of our secret. Maybe you should wait, I told Jason. Maybe you should stay close for a while. I made it sound like motherly wisdom, but it was fear dressed up as advice. Jason went quiet. Why? He asked. Nothing is wrong, I said, the sentence that became my reflex. We just like having you nearby. He let it go, but his voice changed after that, less open, more guarded, like a door left on the chain. The months that followed were a slow parade of compromises. Michael started asking me to handle calls he did not want to answer. If the phone rang with a number we did not recognize, he would stare at it, as if it might bite, then look at me. Sometimes I picked up and lied with my own name. Sometimes I let it go to voicemail and deleted the message before he could hear it. I became the gatekeeper of reality. At family dinners, Sarah watched our faces more than she ate. Jason asked questions that sounded casual, but were not. So what projects are you working on lately, Dad? How is the budget looking, Mom? They were not rude. They were collecting data. I could see it happening, the way I used to see it when my kids were teenagers, and they were trying to figure out whether I was serious about a rule. Only now they were measuring trust. Michael tried to compensate by being extra generous in public. He bought expensive steaks once and acted cheerful, and Sarah stared at the receipt like it was evidence. Jason offered to wash dishes after dinner and whispered to me near the sink. Mom, are you sure everything is okay? I turned on the faucet so the water would cover the tremor in my voice. Yes, I said, and the lie tasted metallic in my mouth. That night, after everyone left, I stood in the hallway and looked at the family photos. I noticed something I had not noticed before. The pictures were proof we had once been close. but they were not proof we were still safe. The silence had done its work. It had not only hidden a problem, it had taught my children that their mother would look them in the eye and not tell them the truth. And once that lesson is learned, it does not disappear. It sits between people at the table, quiet as a shadow, waiting for the moment it finally steps into the light. The day everything broke open did not arrive with a dramatic announcement. It arrived the way most disasters do in real life, with ordinary sounds and one small interruption that changes the meaning of the whole morning. I was folding towels in the laundry room when the doorbell rang, sharp and impatient, not like a neighbor stopping by for sugar. Michael was supposed to be at work, but he had been taking personal days more and more, drifting around the house like a man avoiding his own shadow. He froze when the bell rang, then looked at me with a pleading expression I had. "Learn to read. Please handle it. Please keep it quiet." I walked to the front door and opened it just enough to see a man standing on the porch holding a clipboard. He wore a polite, professional smile that did not reach his eyes. He asked for Michael Carter by full name, the way a form asks for your identity without caring about your feelings. I felt my throat tighten. "He is not available," I said, and even as I spoke, I heard the lie like a crack in glass. The man's eyes flicked past my shoulder, as if he could see the shape of my husband hiding inside the hallway. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I need to confirm that this is his residence." I nodded because denying it would have been ridiculous, and because some part of me still believed the right tone could make a hard moment softer. He held out papers. "These are time-sensitive," he said. I took them with hands that suddenly felt too small. I closed the door and pressed my back against it, staring at the printed words like they were written in a language I should have learned years ago. Michael stepped into the living room, his face tight, his jaw working as if he were chewing something bitter. "What is it?" he asked, though he already knew. I did not answer right away. I flipped through the pages, scanning for numbers, dates, warnings, phrases that looked official enough to ruin a life. My heart pounded in my ears. Then I saw it, the kind of notice no one wants to hold in their hands, the kind that does not care if you are a good person or a bad one. A timeline, a demand, a process that had moved forward while we were still pretending we could control it. "Michael," I said, and my voice sounded thin. "What did you do?" He reached for the papers, and I pulled them back. That movement, tiny and instinctive, was the first time I physically resisted him in years. His eyes flashed. "Evelyn, not now," he snapped, and the sharpness of his tone felt like a new person stepping into the room. "Not now," I repeated, and something in me finally stood up straight. "When, Michael? When was I supposed to know?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, then rubbed his face like a man trying to wipe away reality. "I had it under control," he said, the sentence he always used when things were clearly not controlled. I could hear myself breathing, fast and shallow, and I realized I was standing in the middle of our living room, in our nice house, holding proof that the picture was a lie. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. 2 words, "Are you home?" My stomach dropped. Before I could respond, another buzz. "Jason, are you okay?" I stared at the screen, confused. Then I heard it. Muffled voices outside, not loud, but close, like people gathered near a fence. I moved to the window and saw Mrs. Donnelly on her porch, her arms crossed, watching. 2 other neighbors stood near their driveway pretending to talk, while clearly looking toward my house. Someone had a phone raised, just for a second, then lowered it when they noticed me. It hit me with a cold clarity. The man on my porch had not only delivered papers, he had delivered attention. In our neighborhood, attention travels faster than truth. Minutes later, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway, tires crunching gravel like punctuation. She stepped out, not with her usual tote bag and cheerful efficiency, but with a hard set to her shoulders. Jason's name flashed again on my phone. Then his voice came through when I answered, tense and strained. "Mom, I just got a call from Aunt Linda," he said. "She said something is happening. What is going on?" I looked at Michael. He stood behind me, silent, letting me take the hit, letting me explain the disaster he had built. Sarah rang the bell once, then opened the storm door like she belonged there, because she did. She walked in and saw the papers in my hand. Her eyes moved from the documents to my face to her father's. The room went quiet in that awful way where everyone knows the truth, but no one wants to be the first to speak it. "Tell me," Sarah said, each word measured. "Tell me what this is." I tried to speak, but my mouth did not cooperate. Michael stepped forward, attempting his calm voice, the one he used in public. "It is complicated," he began. Sarah cut him off. "Complicated is what people say when they are hiding something," she said. And her eyes snapped to me. "Mom, how long have you known?" That question was the real blow, because it was aimed at my silence, not his mess. I felt my cheeks burn. I heard myself say the phrase I had lived on. "It is not what you think." Sarah's expression changed, not into anger first, but into a kind of hurt that looked like disbelief collapsing. "Do not do that," she said. "Do not use that line on me." Michael tried to talk over her, to steer the conversation, but his voice rose, and the calm mask slipped. He blamed timing, the economy, stress, bad luck, anything except the choices that had led here. Sarah listened for a moment. Then she turned to me again, eyes shining but steady. "You told me you were fine," she said. "You took my money. You looked me in the eye." Her voice tightened. "You chose him over telling us the truth." The sentence hit with a finality I could not undo. On the phone, Jason was silent, and that silence was heavier than yelling. "Mom," he said finally, quiet and exhausted. "I cannot do this. I cannot keep guessing what is real." I could hear the distance in his voice, like he had stepped back from me in his mind. Sarah took a slow breath, as if trying not to fall apart. Then she shook her head once. "I need space," she said, and her words were careful, like she was handling something fragile that might cut her. She walked out without slamming the door, which somehow hurt more, because it meant she still had control, and I did not. Michael stood there, staring at the floor, and for a moment he looked smaller, not because he was sorry, but because his secret had finally been dragged into daylight. I stared at the papers in my hands and understood the cruelest truth of all. The notice was not the moment our family fell apart. It was only the moment everyone else could see the cracks that my silence had been widening for years. In the weeks after that Tuesday, our house did not explode into shouting matches or dramatic scenes. It did something quieter and far more final. It went cold. The living room still had the same couch, the same framed photos, the same lamp Michael insisted was fine even though it flickered. But the air felt different, like the heat had been turned down inside the walls. Michael stopped trying to explain. I stopped trying to rescue. We moved around each other in careful lines, like strangers sharing a small space for too long. He would leave early, come home late, or sit in the garage with the car door open as if he needed the outside air to breathe. I would wash dishes that were already clean, fold laundry that did not need folding, and stare at my phone until the screen went dark. The worst sound was not a ring anymore. It was silence. I called Sarah the next day and left a message that sounded like a woman begging politely. I told her I loved her, that I was sorry, that I wanted to talk. She did not call back. I texted Jason a long message with full sentences and careful words, the way you write when you are trying not to trigger someone's anger. He responded with one line, "I need time." Time became the new distance unit in our family, measured in unanswered calls and holidays spent apart. At church, people smiled too hard. Women I had hugged for years suddenly kept their hands busy with bulletins and purses, as if touching me might stain them. Michael and I sat in our usual pew, but there was a gap between us that felt wider than the aisle. On the way home, he would grip the steering wheel and say nothing. I would look out the window and count the mailboxes we passed, because counting gave my mind something to do besides fall apart. At home, practical life continued, because it always does. Bills still arrived. Groceries still needed buying. The lawn still needed mowing, though Michael started skipping Saturdays. When he did mow, he did it fast, angry at the grass, angry at the sound of the mower, angry at the fact that neighbors could see him moving like a man trying to prove he belonged. I began noticing the way people's eyes followed him, not openly, but enough. That attention never left. It just learned to hide. One evening, Linda Brooks came by. Linda had been my friend since before the kids were born, the kind of friend who knew where you kept extra towels without asking. She stood in my kitchen holding a store-bought pie like a peace offering, looking at me with a sadness that did not pretend. "Evelyn," she said softly, "I heard." I swallowed and nodded. I expected her to say something comforting, something that let me keep a shred of dignity. Instead, she said, "How long?" The question was gentle, but it was sharp. I stared at the pie, at the neat plastic lid, at the way the label was perfectly centered, and I felt foolish for thinking anything could still look neat in my life. Too long, I admitted. Linda set the pie on the counter and leaned in just enough for me to feel her presence without feeling trapped. I am not here to judge you, she said. I am here to tell you something you do not want to hear. My throat tightened. She took a slow breath. You did not just keep his secret, she continued. You made it possible for it to keep growing. The words landed hard because they matched what I had been trying not to say to myself. I wanted to argue, to explain, to defend my intentions. I wanted to tell her that I was trying to protect the children, protect the marriage, protect the home. But the truth was, I had been protecting the image. Linda reached across the counter and touched my hand. You can love someone and still tell the truth, she said. In fact, if you love your children, you have to. After Linda left, I wandered into the hallway where the family photos hung. Sarah in her graduation cap. Jason holding a baseball glove bigger than his head. Michael and me at a picnic, smiling into sunlight like we had nothing to fear. I stood there so long my legs started to ache. Then I did something I had not done in years. I opened the drawer in the side table where I kept my old journals. I had started writing in them when Sarah was a baby, because my mother used to say that if you do not write your life down, you forget what you survived. I pulled out the one with the faded blue cover and sat on the floor, back against the wall, like a child hiding. The pages smelled like paper and time. My handwriting looked younger in the early entries, rounder, more hopeful. I flipped forward, searching for the shadows started. The farther I turned, the heavier my chest felt, because I began to recognize the pattern. Small worries, small excuses, small lines I told myself to stay calm. Then I found it. A short entry I had written after the first statement I discovered. The first day, I could have changed everything. I had written one sentence, underlined so hard the pen almost tore the page. If I tell the truth, we might break, but if I stay quiet, we will rot from the inside. I stared at that line until my eyes blurred, because there it was, in my own handwriting, proof that I had known exactly what I was doing and chose it anyway. That night, Evelyn did not sleep in her bed. She lay on the couch with a blanket pulled to her chin, as if cloth could shield her from memory. The house creaked the way it always had, but every sound now felt accusing. In the morning, she made coffee and opened the diary again, not for comfort, but for proof. Her own handwriting told her what she had tried not to admit. She had known, and her silence had been a choice. At the kitchen table where she had once confronted Michael, she read page after page until her eyes burned. The entries were not really about money. They were about fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of becoming the kind of family people whispered about. Fear of losing the appearance of respectability. She saw how deeply she had been shaped by the lessons she grew up with. A good woman keeps things together, a good wife protects her husband, and family trouble stays inside the house. She remembered her mother saying that other people did not need to know their business. Evelyn had followed that rule for so long it had become part of her identity. So when Michael asked her to stay quiet, it had not only felt like loyalty, it had felt like obedience. But the diary forced her to admit something worse. She had not only feared gossip, she had feared what the truth would demand. Honesty would have required painful conversations with Sarah and Jason. It might have brought consequences for Michael. It might even have destroyed the marriage she had spent years trying to preserve. She had told herself that silence meant stability. In reality, she had chosen the illusion of control, believing that if she held everything tightly enough, nothing would spill. Instead, the damage had spread. An old underlined sentence about hidden rot made her stomach turn, because it described their family perfectly. The secret had not stayed contained. It had moved quietly through every relationship in the house. Later that morning, Michael walked into the kitchen looking tired and diminished. His hair was uncombed, his shoulders slumped. He stopped when he saw the diary open in front of her and asked why she was reading it. Evelyn told him she needed to understand what she had done. Michael said she had not done this, that he had. But she refused to let him take all the blame. He had created the mess, she said, but she had helped him hide it, and by hiding it, she had helped it grow. For a moment, he looked ready to argue. Instead, he sat across from her with his hands clasped and admitted he had been scared. He had not wanted the children to hate him. Evelyn answered quietly that Sarah and Jason were not wounded by his fear. They were wounded by the lies and by the fact that she had joined him in telling them. Then he asked what she was going to do. The question revealed the old pattern between them. He still expected her to manage the aftermath and somehow protect what was left. Evelyn closed the diary beneath her hand and said she was going to tell the truth. Michael asked her not to. For a second, the old instinct rose in her, the urge to calm him and keep the peace. But she thought of Sarah's stiff hug and Jason's tired voice. Her children had not only lost trust in their father, they had lost trust in her, and she had earned that. Standing there with trembling hands, Evelyn, the first call I made was to Sarah, and my hand shook so badly I had to press my elbow against the table to steady it. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. In the past, I would have taken that as an excuse to retreat, telling myself she was busy, that I would try again later, and later would quietly become never. This time, I spoke anyway. "Sarah," I said, my voice breaking, "it is Mom. I am not calling to explain anything away. I am calling to tell you the truth. I knew before you did, and I stayed quiet. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was protecting the image of our family and the comfort of pretending. I let you help without telling you what you were carrying. That was wrong. You deserved honesty from me, even if it hurt, even if it changed everything. I am sorry for the fear I placed on you and the trust one broke. I am not asking for forgiveness today. I just want you to know I am done hiding." When I ended the call, my chest ached like I had been holding my breath for years. Then I called Jason. He answered on the second ring, and his voice nearly unraveled me. I told him I was not calling to ask him to fix anything. I said he deserved the truth, that his father had made choices that caused real damage, and that I had chosen silence. I admitted I helped keep it hidden, and that my fear had cost us years we could not recover. When he asked why, I looked at the diary and answered honestly. I had been afraid of judgment, afraid of losing the life that made us look respectable, afraid of what truth would demand. But my fear had not protected my children. It had only delayed their pain. That night, Michael and I sat in silence, but it was no longer hiding. It was what remained after the truth entered the room. I wrote one final line in my diary. I chose silence because it was easier, and it became the hardest thing I have ever carried.